The wind howled a song of death across the vast white expanse of 19th century Alaska. Elias, a lone hunter with a face weathered by sun and ice, trudged forward, each step a painful defiance of the sub-zero air. His breath bloomed in a cloud before his face, a fragile ghost against the brutal landscape. For days, the blizzard had pinned him down, a relentless siege of swirling snow and biting cold. His supplies were gone. His rifle was silent, and the fear of a final permanent sleep was a cold hand gripping his heart. His survival instinct screamed at him to find shelter, any shelter, before the darkness descended. He was almost ready to give up when he saw it. A thin wisp of smoke curling from a chimney, a fragile sign of life in the immense wilderness. With renewed strength he stumbled towards it, his frozen boots crunching on the pristine snow. The cabin was a small, defiant structure of rough-hewn logs, nestled against a stand of snow-laden pines. A single window glowed with the warm light of a lantern. Elias hammered on the door, a desperate rhythm of a man on the brink. The door creaked open to reveal a woman. She was not old, nor was she frail. Her face, etched with a quiet resilience, was framed by a thick, dark braid. Her eyes, the color of rich earth, were wary, scrutinizing him with an unnerving intensity. In her hands, she held a large knife, its blade reflecting the lamplight. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the desperation in his own. "Shelter," Elias rasped, his lips stiff and numb. "The storm. My supplies are gone. I'll pay you whatever you want." The woman's gaze did not soften. She looked him up and down, taking in his exhausted frame, his tattered coat, and the hunger in his eyes. He was a stranger, a ghost from the outside world she had chosen to leave behind. She knew the kind of man he was, or at least the kind she believed him to be. A wanderer, a taker, someone who would disappear with the first sign of sun. But she also saw the genuine terror of a man facing his end. She took a deep breath, her own conflict playing out in her eyes. The cold air rushed into the cabin, and she shivered slightly before making her decision. "There is only one price for a man's life in a storm like this," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "One night in my bed or leave with nothing." The words hit Elias like a physical blow, a different kind of cold that seized his very soul. He was a proud man, a hunter who had always stood on his own 2 feet. This wasn't a transaction. It was a demand that shook the very foundation of his character. He stared at her, the blood draining from his face, and for a moment he considered turning back into the storm. His heart was a block of ice, frozen by the sheer, brutal ultimatum. The silence hung between them, thick and heavy. Outside, the wind rattled the cabin walls. Inside, the fire crackled, a warm, beckoning sound. Her hand tightened on the knife. He knew she would use it if he made any move she deemed a threat. He was a man with nothing left to lose. But now he was faced with losing his dignity as well. He looked at the warmth, the faint smell of wood smoke and cooked meat, and then at the swirling snow outside. The choice was not a choice at all. It was survival. Slowly, deliberately, he nodded. "I accept." The woman's expression did not change. She simply opened the door wider, a silent invitation. Elias stepped inside, the blast of warm air, a sudden, blissful shock against his raw skin. He closed the door behind him, sealing himself inside with a woman whose name he didn't know, but whose face was now a permanent part of his memory. What happened next would either save him or break him entirely. If you are captivated by this story of survival and human connection, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible narratives. This is all one video, so you won't want to miss the next chapter. The morning light, a pale grey filtered through the single window, revealed a new kind of tension. Elias awoke on a bearskin rug by the fire, his body aching but his mind no longer consumed by the thought of death. The woman was already up, her back to him as she worked on a caribou hide. She moved with a silent, practiced grace. She hadn't held him to her word. The night had passed in quiet, mutual respect. They were two solitary wolves who had found temporary shelter together, an unspoken pact sealed not by desire, but by the necessity of the storm. The cabin was small, but every inch of it was a testament to her self-sufficiency. There were bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, furs meticulously stretched and prepared, and a small, well-tended garden of preserved roots. "Anya," she said without turning around. It wasn't an introduction, but a simple statement of fact. "Elias," he replied, his voice rough. Anya turned then, her eyes meeting his. The distrust was still there, but it was layered with something else now, a quiet curiosity. She tossed him a piece of dried meat. "Eat. You'll need your strength." As the storm raged on for the next 3 days, they fell into a routine born of forced proximity. The cabin became their entire world. Anya taught him how to stitch a tear in a hide so the seam would be invisible. She showed him how to identify the subtle signs of a coming thaw and how to read the animal tracks in the snow, not just for a hunt, but for a story. Elias, in turn, fixed the creaking cabin door and helped her move a massive stack of firewood she had been putting off. The silence between them was no longer awkward or filled with hostility. It became comfortable, a language of shared tasks and quiet presence. One evening, as the fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, Anya spoke of her past. "I was not always alone," she said, her voice soft. "The land takes what it wants. A sickness took my family. Strangers, they tried to take the rest." Her eyes were distant, looking at a memory he could only guess at. "I learned to depend on no one." This was her truth, the reason for the knife and the extreme proposition. She wasn't cold, she was a survivor. Elias listened, his own guard slowly melting away. He told her about his life, the loss that had driven him to the far north, not just a hunting trip, but an escape, a need to prove to himself that he could stand on his own after a life of dependence. He had come to the wilderness to find strength, but all he had found was loneliness and the brink of death. As the days passed, the frozen state of his heart began to thaw. He saw Anya not as a symbol of the harsh land, but as its truest expression, unforgiving, yet capable of nurturing life. The one night was no longer a transaction, but a test he had passed without realizing it. He had chosen survival, and in doing so, he had found something unexpected. A connection that was growing, slow and steady, like the first sprouts of spring after a long, hard winter. He found himself looking at her when she was not watching, admiring the strength in her hands, the intelligence in her eyes. They were two people who had built walls around their hearts, but the storm had forced them together, and now those walls were beginning to crumble. On the 5th morning, the wind was gone. The world outside was hushed, the air crisp and clear. Sunlight, brilliant and blinding, streamed through the window, turning the snow into a field of diamonds. The storm had broken, and with it, the quiet, shared life inside the cabin was ending. Elias knew it was time to leave. The initial pact was fulfilled. He had been given shelter and his life was saved. Yet as he packed his meager belongings, a deep, unfamiliar ache settled in his chest, a feeling of both profound gratitude and a chilling sense of loss. He moved slowly, deliberately, each small act a final farewell to the cabin and the woman who had become its heart. "Thank you," he said, turning to face her, "for your help. I truly owe you my life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved eagle figurine. Its wings were outstretched, a symbol of freedom he had always chased. It was the only valuable thing he owned, a piece of his past and a testament to the life he had lived before the storm. "This is all I have left, for your trouble." Anya looked at the eagle, then back at him. Her expression was a hard, unreadable mask. "You think you can pay for a life with a trinket?" she asked, her voice tinged with a cold he hadn't heard in days. It was the same tone that had met him at her door, a stark reminder of who she was before they were trapped together. "I did not save you to be paid. I saved you because the land demands we help those who need it. A life is not a transaction." The words were a brutal truth, a final lesson he needed to learn. He saw the eagle in his hand not as a gesture of thanks, but as a barrier. His offer of payment was an attempt to revert to the old ways, to the transactional nature of his past. It was a refusal to accept the gift she had truly given him, not just shelter, but a shared humanity. He had tried to put a price on something that was priceless, to turn a moment of genuine connection into a simple debt. He realized in that moment that his original pride wasn't strength, but a form of profound isolation, a refusal to accept help or truly connect with anyone. It was what had brought him to the brink of death. Anya walked over to the door and opened it, letting in a flood of cold air and brilliant light that seemed to cleanse the cabin of its recent warmth. The outside world, so vast and unforgiving, waited for him. "You have your life," she said, her gaze steady, locking with his. "Now, what will you do with it?" It was a question, not a dismissal. The hunter who had arrived with a frozen heart was gone. In his place was a man humbled by the wilderness and the woman who lived in it. He looked at her, at the quiet strength in her eyes and the lines of a life lived on her own terms, and saw not just a survivor, but a partner. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of all that had passed and all that was yet to be. "I won't leave with nothing," he said, his voice firm, echoing her words from days ago, but with a new meaning. He placed the eagle figurine on a small wooden table by the fire, a sign that he was leaving his old self behind. "I came here to prove I could survive alone. I've learned that's not what truly matters. I've learned that survival isn't just about food and shelter, it's about not being alone." He stepped towards her, and for the first time, she did not recoil. The distance between them, a physical and emotional chasm that had defined their relationship, closed. His hand, no longer a fist, reached for hers, and she did not pull away. "Let me stay," he said, not as a desperate plea for shelter, but as an offer of a future. "Let me learn from you. We can face the seasons together." Anya's gaze softened, the hard edge in her eyes melting away. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a glimmer of sun after a long winter. She saw the change in him, the shift from a lonely, stubborn man to someone ready to build a life. The blizzard had not taken his life, but it had taken his old self, freezing it away, so a new one, more open and full of promise, could emerge. "The snow will melt soon," she said, her voice soft and full of the quiet promise of spring. "And there is much work to do before the thaw." Elias knew his heart was no longer frozen. It was beating, warm and full, ready to begin. The hunter had arrived on the brink of death, but he didn't leave with nothing. He left with a new life, a new purpose, and the woman who taught him that true strength lies not in surviving alone, but in building a future together.